So our next speaker, acclaimed chef Angela Dimayuga, formerly of Mission Chinese Food in Vinegar Hill House, wants to change our perceptions of what a hotel restaurant or even a hotel can actually be. In May, she joined the Standard International as its new creative director of food and culture. It's a brand new role that was tailor-made for her. And our conversation today is going to focus on how chefs like Angela are using a larger platform outside of running a kitchen to focus on activism and deepening the connection between food, art, and politics. So Angela, thank you so much for being with us today. There are some people out there who strongly believe that food and politics should never mix. But I know, one of your mentors, Anthony Bourdain, often said that there's nothing more political than food. And I think it's very clear that you feel the same way. So I wanted to ask you, what is it that you hope to do with this connection between food, art, and politics, just to really spearhead activism in your new role?
Yeah, thanks for having me, by the way. Thinking about politics with food is a very personal journey for me. I think that when I was working as an executive chef at Mission Chinese, I was building my name, building signature dishes and building a following. And I realized along the way when I started to speak about who I am, there was larger interest on why I'm making this food. And then I personally had more interest in then speaking about my own personal identity politics, what it feels like in the chef world, or to be cooking like the person I am, because I wanted to be a chef ever since I was a kid and never really saw chefs like me growing up. And I think that what I realized was that personal connection and speaking about who I am made the work a lot more meaningful and purposeful for me individually. So I can't really speak to how other people could do it, but for me, that's when it became a lot more meaningful, just speaking about being Filipino American or the child of immigrants, also my sexual identity, identifying as queer, and all of that just made me feel like I could do a lot more, because then I didn't have to speak about basic bio information about myself. I can move from feeling like I always felt sort of different and marginalized within the chef industry, but then I felt like I could just move more purposefully in it. And a lot of the food, I think, from my chef friends that are my peers that I think is really interesting does discuss their own personal identity politics. And that's what I find interesting. I think the food has an authenticness to who they are, and then they can be really expressive themselves. And the way that, for me, I've been linking food, art, and politics within the standard world is thinking about outreaching to chefs that care about activism in their own way. And, I never present myself as an activist because that's not what I am, but I am a chef. And, food systems have so much to do with culture and biodiversity that we have a responsibility. And so because that's our way of expressing ourselves, we've banded together with a bunch of really great names to start a series called Chef Stands Up. It's continued from a programming that we did last year, and then we're building it so that it's in 3 cities this time around, both in LA, Miami, and New York City. And the way that we're linking food, art, and activism is that we are working with the ACLU, specifically for the Immigration Rights Project, because the hospitality industry works so much with immigrants and they often make up the backbone of the industry. We really want to celebrate their cultures. And for example, our first chef, Devon Francis, is cooking tomorrow in Miami. And he is Jamaican American, and he wants to celebrate Caribbean cuisine. So he made a zine showcasing the staff that we have at the Standard who are Caribbean, and then we're going to be making food celebrating their cultures. And there's ongoing work where they will also serve the food in the hotel rooms as room service, so that there's a connection from the guest experience. If you're, who is it that makes up your bed when you leave. Say you took a nap and you left and somebody made up your bed. Who is it that makes up your bed? And so there's a self-awareness around it, and then continue to celebrate them, and then continue to support the ACLU with those food items remaining on the menu. So that was kind of more of a specific example of how we're doing it at the Standard, because this is work that, I've just been really excited about. One of the biggest initiatives that we're doing since I've only been with the company for about 4 months. So that's something that I'm super, super excited about.
Yeah, no, it's really good. It's amazing. So
Thanks.
can't wait to see it continue to unfold. I wanted to ask you, just prior to your joining the Standard in this new role, what was your own sort of relationship or perspective of hotels and hotel restaurants? Like, what did you think of them? Did you frequent them often? Did you ever sort of imagine yourself working for a hotel company?
No, I mean, when I was younger, and because I said I wanted to be a chef ever since I was a kid, I was always very curious about hotels, because I think there's that other level of hospitality where you can really reach a customer. But for me, as a young line cook, when I was 20, 21, I would save all my line cook earnings, which wasn't very much, and go on staycations because I couldn't really leave New York very much. And so I would maybe just book a hotel room somewhere random in like Queens, and just feel like I could like celebrate a certain occasion. And just kind of just take a little break. And so that was always really fun for me, even as a young cook. And I think I've always liked how hotels can be a space for gatherings. And then specifically with the Standard, I became acquainted with the Standard mostly through our Highline location. And, I really had a connection with the property, because when the Whitney opened up nearby, there would be a lot of really fun gatherings there, parties at Top of the Standard or at Le Bain, and I'd frequent because of the proximity. And so I always thought the company, or like the hotel group, was just really fun and expressive. And so, eventually we started working together, but I was always intrigued by hotels in general, and then intrigued with the food offerings, or just like the experience and design around the Standard specifically. But I ended up working with the Standard because I did the closing of the Chef Stand-Up series last year at the Miami Art Basel event, where we got to cook a dinner that was Caribbean, or it was inspired by like all the tropical ingredients, and it was my first time doing a pop-up outside of Mission Chinese after I left my job there, and I just had a really good time. It was benefiting the ACLU. A bunch of designers donated designs to the ACLU, and they had a merch line, and so we were celebrating the merch line. They would have like sweatshirts that are the design of the USA Dream Team, but it would say DACA on it, and it was just a really fun event. Yeah. And so from that experience, I ended up meeting Amar Lalvani, our CEO, and really we really hit it off.
Yeah, and now we're here today. So
Yeah.
That's great. I was also thinking, specifically about the Standard brand. What is it that you eventually or ultimately want people to associate with that brand in particular? Like, what do you want people to think of in terms of what it stands for, and in terms of inclusiveness? Because I think, sort of historically, the brand has kind of been marketed as a brand that's maybe, not necessarily for everyone, but how are you sort of approaching that?
I think that, another element that I really like about hotels is that element of surprise and delight. And, those are all things that I really enjoyed doing, working on design and food and just general concepting at Mission Chinese. And so to apply all of my interests on a, with a bigger platform on a different scale, I think is really interesting. Having the resources of working with designers or bringing in artists that I'm interested in into the fold. That's really amazing for me. I think that in regards to how we want to, like what work do I want to apply to the brand and what we want to accomplish. It's what I'm excited about is a lot of my work, because it's sort of a vague term, like creative director of food and culture. Like, what the hell does that mean? A lot of my work is thinking about concepting for new locations, and then places that we will be renovating, and then thinking about that holistically and what that looks like in a site-specific way per city. But then also a lot of my daily work is this programming that I really care about. Chef Stands Up is a really great example of that, but also sharing that space in an inclusive way with other people that I really admire in the industry. For example, we're going to be hosting Julia Tershin's online archival website, which is called EAT, which is Equity at the Table. And it's an online archival website so that women in the industry can submit profiles of their work, or if you're tangential to the food industry, maybe you're a food stylist or a photographer, and it kind of resolves that problem of, oh, I didn't get to work with a female chef because I don't know any female chefs. You can look at that website and look at what type of jobs people do, because a lot of people have hyphenated work. So we're hosting people like Eat at the Standard, and that's how I want to bring in like a lot of like-minded people as well. Yeah. So through the food, but also through our programming.
Sounds great. I also wanted to ask you, how do your experience specifically as how does your experience as a working chef sort of play into your role here? Like what lessons from the kitchen are you bringing?
Well, it comes up a lot. I mean, that's like why. So that's why specifically they hired me. That on this level, speaking on the executive team, they haven't had a chef who's dogged out in the kitchen for 16 hours a day, what that feels like, or how you can maybe create a dish by volume, or what that experience is like as a diner. Everyone that I work with is definitely a foodie, and so they're very excited about this next chapter. I think that, the goals are that you take that experience as a chef and then apply that creatively. So you think about innovation, you think about partners that you want to work with. Maybe, for me, what I offer all the time is, oh, I really love this kombucha company. They make this really great kombucha that's barrel aged. So I get really nerdy about it. All the things that I'm nerdy about are craft oriented, that then we could bring to the brand, and then have a bigger platform for those purveyors as well. So it's really like taking restaurants within hotels to the next level, where I don't want the restaurants to just be a restaurant that, it's a restaurant that happens to be at a hotel. That's the idea, that instead of it being a hotel restaurant, it's like this is a great restaurant. It also is in a hotel. So you can integrate the community, you can integrate the local community through programming, but then also have something really interesting for the hotel guests.
Right. Exactly. What are some interesting programming things that you have lined up that you can divulge with us?
Well, I think what would be a good example too is think about just things that I've done recently. We hosted this Asian collective that's a nightlife collective recently at Le Bain, and they had never thrown a party at this size before. We ended up hosting them during Pride, and they're like a gay Asian nightlife group called Bubble Tea.
Yes.
And they're amazing. They throw the most amazing parties. Mm-hmm. Every detail is perfect. I ended up doing food with them for the event, but for Pride, they threw a party at Le Bain, which has a hot tub in the club, and so I worked with them to create ideas around what could this hot tub be, so that we turned the hot tub into we called it a hot pot, and they made decorations for the hot tub that looked like a hot pot, and they had drag queens performing, and then the drag queens jumped into the hot pot, and then we served a what we were calling the spa water cup of noodle with ingredients that looked like the floaties that we put into it, upstairs on the rooftop. So there was a reason to have a cup of noodle at a party. So I think it's that level, that attention to detail is super fun, and I think that's how the hotel spaces can be engaging. Yeah. In a food way, it's we have this party, but then there's a fun food element. We made CBD Jello shots that had Hoji Chow whipped cream on it. It was just a fun little thing that's, we can take things really seriously and think about activism, but then we can also just have fun options for food specific for an activation.
Right. And I know you mentioned innovation and sort of looking at ways to sort of reinvent our perceptions of a restaurant that's in a hotel.
Yeah.
You actually have a really long, a deep family history of innovation in dining in your family. I don't know if you guys know this, but her dad actually helped he invented the McDonald's extra value meal. And your family is also behind Red Ribbon Bakery, which I used to go to all the time as a kid back in LA.
Cool.
But yeah, so I mean, what are some of your plans for future innovations?
Yeah, you really like pumped me up there. Yeah. I'm like definitely not inventing an extra value meal, but yeah, my dad worked for McDonald's for 17 years, and in the 90s developed the set meals that eventually became, that actually right away became the extra value meal. And then, yeah, my family, my grandmother's family owns a Filipino bakery called Red Ribbon, which got sold to Jollibee, which is the Philippines, like, it's like the Filipino version of McDonald's. They sell like sweet spaghetti and fried chicken. But sorry, what was your question? I got really into
just
that.
like I wanted to ask you, what are some other like future things that you have up your sleeve?
Oh yeah, so I'm always interested in thinking about innovation and how we can think about future food systems. A partner of mine who's a frequent collaborator that I've been working with for the past few years is Dr. Arielle Johnson, and she's a food chemist. I met her because she's one of the founders of the NOMA Fermentation Lab, and I got to work with her because we took over NOMA, and I've participated in the MAD Symposium, which is the huge chef conference they throw every year. And so we have a lot of ideas on like what we can do together. We're going to continue our collaborative work together. We actually TBA, like I can't really announce what it is, but we work together talking about the future of food. Who we discussed in a panel talk at the MAD Symposium. Who have we been told is the future of food, and what have we been told is the future of food? Maybe that's AI or like Soylent, but we can actually approach the future of food as more interdisciplinary. It doesn't have to be the people funding it, always have to be like venture capitalists. It could be people that view their work in an interdisciplinary way, which is how I approach my chef work. And for her as a food scientist, she also is definitely an interdisciplinary worker where, for example, when I found out from her that her dad is a performance artist in the Basque region of Spain, I was like, okay, that's why this is why this this connection makes sense to me, because we just got along so well, and she's somebody that I want to continue to work with. She will be a collaborator of ours at the Standard. I've also worked with this food agriculture business called Smallhold Farms. They're based out of Brooklyn, and they create temperature and humidity controlled boxes where you can grow mushrooms out of recycled substrate. So you use, they basically create recipes for mushrooms. I think when we've seen this, when I've seen people doing this, they often make oyster mushrooms because those are the easiest to grow. But what they've done is develop recipes using specific types of wood that is sawdust from a mill, which is basically, waste material, rice hulls, and they add spores to the mix, and then they will deliver mushroom spores in bags, and then you can grow mushrooms on site. So I worked with them building the first mushroom farm at Mission Chinese, and we have future plans together. So those are all things that get me really excited, and they are very specific, but they all make sense to, I think, all the collaborative work that I've done with chefs and other creatives in the past.
That sounds amazing. Stuff I can't wait to check out soon. So let's take some questions from the audience. So let's see, the top question is, how does your creative process vary between creating food and experiences for a hotel versus a standalone restaurant?
Yeah, so I think the one big and beautiful thing about how the food experiences at a hotel versus a standalone restaurant is we can do more. I would often do at restaurants piecemeal events, I've done an event where we turned Mission into, which is a Chinese restaurant, Asian restaurant, we turned it into a steakhouse themed restaurant for Halloween, and that was our costume. All the waiters wore tuxedos, and then I made a giant shrimp sculpture for cocktail hour, and it was really fun. Everyone dressed up that we invited in Halloween costumes. I think what's really great about the hotels is we can do site-specific events like that, but then we can then also have bigger initiatives that affect that people can experience nationally, just like Chef Stands Up. So I think that's what I'm really excited about, because it's basically on a different level.
Yeah.
So that's very new for me, and very difficult to juggle, but fun.
Yeah. And what can the restaurant industry do to make lesser represented chefs feel more welcome?
I think that one great thing about thinking about hotels as the entire property as one living, breathing space is that there's opportunities to they're often like they're multi-outlets, or there's different ways that you could serve food. And so I think that if you're thinking about making the space in a really dynamic way, each outlet should be very different from each other. So there's a reason why people go to each outlet. And in that respect, I think that you can offer really diverse foods, global food. Like I think I throw that around a lot within the standard. Like, how do we think about food more globally? What types of ethnic cuisine can we serve? Also, thinking about like we threw a Fashion Week dinner party a couple weeks ago, and what's really great about my position now is we could celebrate these. It was a women in fashion dinner, and we celebrated women that have done distinguished work in the fashion industry, but a lot of them were people that had been around for a while, making work maybe for 10, 15 years. I thought that what would be really important to make this space a lot more dynamic is think about younger generations of designers or people that are maybe not at that level, but invite them too, that maybe they're working their way up to be a fashion photographer, or they're writers and they care about fashion. So really diversifying the spaces and thinking about diversity, not just ethnically, but intergenerationally, and just really trying to approach it in the most intersectional way that we can.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Angela. We really appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.